Now on All Our FM, a report from our community newsroom.
You're listening to Anglo-Polish All Our FM. I'm George Matlock. Trade union membership in the UK has been in decline since government reforms of the workplace in the 1980s. Now, only a quarter of the British workforce is protected by membership of a union, and that's about half of what it was in the 1980s. But in some ethnic groups, such as Polish workers, that is as low as 8%, and that's even lower than 11% among Polish workers in Poland, a new survey has found. Politicization of unions, disaffection among Poles to the trade union movement back in Poland, and the temporary nature of jobs that Poles carry out in the UK, often employed by agencies or gangmasters, are some of the factors contributing to their low participation. So is a propensity of Poles in some sectors of the economy, such as higher skilled white-collar occupations, to shy away from unions. But the survey by Poland's Institute of Public Affairs and the UK's Labour Research Department also found language, unfamiliarity and fear of victimisation as other impediments. To discuss the findings, I'm joined by the co-author of the report, Dominika Potkańska of the IPA in Warsaw. Good morning, witamy serdecznie.
Good morning, George.
Well, it's great to have you on the air with us today. Dominika, first of all, is that a fair reflection of what your survey has found?
The fair reflection is that what we have found out is that there are, of course, Poles who are engaged in the trade unions. But as you have said, it's not a big number yet. And what is very positive for me is that some of them become leaders. And they are trying to encourage other Polish workers to join the union. Some of the Polish union members become shop stewards, reps, organizers themselves, or they held the position of secretary of the branch. But there are some significant barriers hindering higher participation of Poles in the trade unions in the UK, as you have mentioned yourself. And I think the biggest barrier is the low participation, low civic participation in Poland. There are very different patterns in case of Polish society. So there is a lower level of participation in the election. The turnout in elections, it's around 20%.
Are we talking about political parliamentary elections when you're saying participation in elections or union elections?
No, political elections. What I'm trying to say is that the participation in public sphere in general is much lower in Poland than in UK. So that's why this pattern of being engaged in your workplace, in your community life, is much lower in Poland.
Do you think that's partly? Do you think that's partly also because of a kind of a role reversal in Polish society? If you throw yourself back to, say, 30, 40 years ago, in Poland, everybody had to be a member of the trade union or part of the workers' councils or whatever, because in those days it was career limiting not to be a member of the party and therefore to be a part of the public process, if you want, or part of the public structure. Now that you have free markets thinking coming into it, has there been a kind of a backlash, do you think, against generally being associated with other workers?
Yeah, that is true. It's being also, amazing for me because the idea of trade unionism in Poland, after the fall of communism, it's supposed to shine, but right now I think it's kind of the idea is distorted because of the politicization of trade unionism in Poland right now. So people are connecting it with strikes, with burning tires. So they think that what is the perception of trade unions in Poland is that it's strongly tightened to the right-wing conservative party. So Poles, they don't want to be a part of it, a part of the political movement. Although we all know that it is only a representation of workers, not not the party itself. So what our respondents were telling us is that, it's all about politics. And I wanted to leave this country and go to England just to,
to get away from the politics.
Leave this,
Okay.
leave this politics behind me.
Yeah, well, we recently interviewed somebody about the Polish elections and, of course, the new Law and Justice Party that have been re-elected to Parliament and in both chambers of Parliament and, indeed, the presidency earlier in the year. And, of course, one of the remarkable things is that in the UK, the vote didn't go to Law and Justice. It went to a kind of a rebel musician who has set up a very populist party in Poland, and it seemed to be interpreted as the English-based vote of Poles are very much going towards a protest against the political structures and political wills inside Poland. It's very interesting what you're saying. But the point about politicization in trade unionism, I think, is a very significant one, and I would say that it looks as though it may be a kind of a parallel with the way that British workers in Britain perceive the trade union movement as well, where many of them see them as cosy buddies of the Labour Party, or see them as out for what they can get, as opposed to protecting the rights of workers themselves. How would you say that there is a kind of a synergy there between the way that British workers perceive trade unionism in the UK and the way that Poles in the UK perceive trade unionism?
But in UK, you are mentioning how Poles are perceiving the trade unions in UK, right?
Right.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of similarities, but the biggest barrier is to just answer this question is that there is a big lack of knowledge about the trade unions among Poles in the UK. So, like many of them, they just don't know how trade unions work. How to get engaged, what are the benefits deriving from the in being a member of trade unions.
Right.
So I think that by talking to these not very many Poles that are engaged in the trade unions, I see that they perceive British trade unions as something. Yeah, maybe also a part of the Labour, party movement, but then they see them as a very successful and effective organizations. That they are very grassrooted, and it's also a big difference between Polish and current Polish and UK trade unions. And Poles who already know how British trade unions works, they know that they are very grassrooted, that they are not corrupted, that they are effective, in a sense that they can defend workers' rights very effectively, that they have means in order to defend workers' rights, and that there is a big amount of skills among British trade unions officials, skills in negotiating, in organizing campaigns, in also informing the customers that working conditions in this shop you are buying something, they are not good, and that the employer doesn't respect the workers' rights. And this approach, pro-negotiation approach, is unseen here in Poland. So I think this is a good sign that Polish people, they are trying to find out more about British trade unions, and they see the differences between Polish and British workers' organizations.
The survey that you conducted showed 8% among the Polish workers in the UK as being members of trade unions versus 25% for the wider community here in the UK. You're saying that is it growing? I mean, it's 8% now. Have you been able to track and see a growing from 0 to 8%, or is it fairly static at 8%? Is it continuing to grow, do you think?
It was growing. The number was growing, of course, but there is this, we have to do still a lot in order to engage and encourage Poles to join trade unions in the UK. What is very, very significant, and you have said that, is that Polish workers are employed in the industries and jobs where the union density is lower. right?
Yeah.
So this is a big problem. And for me, as a researcher, but also as an advocacy officer, it's very important to maybe make this comment that there's a big role for trade unions to reach Poles in the industries where the union density is lower. Of course, I know it's very hard maybe to engage people in the sector of manufacturing and so on. But these are the sectors that are the most precarious, and they have most precarious amount of jobs, low paid, and so on. So I think, and during our seminar in London, the representatives of unions also mentioned that now a trade union in UK, they had to put on their agenda to focus on people employed in more precarious sectors and industries. Just coming back to the long history of workers' movement. It's all started in factories. So maybe it's time to undertake more activities in order to target Poles and other migrants, and of course also British people working in low-paid sectors employed by the agencies. But saying that, I want also to underline that there is also a big role for a Polish community to be more organized, to be more active, to have this more proactive approach, and to find out more about trade unions. They just can't, wait for trade unions to find them. They have to find trade unions themselves. So.
Well, you know how it usually works. It usually works with when workers feel that they've been wronged in the workplace. That's when they start to take an interest in trade unionism and employment protection. Until then, it's a little bit like life insurance. You don't really want to buy it because you're healthy and you don't feel you need it. So, okay, so there is an issue there about people being more proactive and finding out about their rights, their legal rights and their employment rights in the UK. One of the things I noticed in your report is you factored in sort of three waves of employment. Obviously, the period immediately after World War II, then the Solidarity years, and now the emancipation through the European Union membership in 2004 of the third wave, if you like, of employment and of Poles coming to the UK to work and to live. I don't know to what extent you were able to dig into those three different phases and see differences, but I would imagine that Polish participation in trade unions, say in the 1950s, would have been much higher in the UK than it is today.
I don't have this data right in my mind, but
certainly, if you were to compare you're right that there is a disparity between the number of Poles at the moment, percentage of Poles in the UK who are members of unions versus the wider community. But these things tend to go up and down together. So, in other words, when trade unionism was much more popular, was much more active in the 50s, 60s and 70s, that would have been the time a large number of people generally would have been members of trade unions. Certainly it was more than double what it is today in the UK. And I would have imagined, and I'm only going on pure guesswork here, that among Polish ethnic community as well, that would have been a much higher percentage than it is at present.
I think you are right, and maybe that is important factor among, historical and political situation back then, these are language skills. Because this second wave of migration, it was more political, and also economic migration in the 50s up to 80s. This wave of migration has had very good language skills, and what we have found out, and what was said in a couple of reports on Polish migration after joining EU, is that there is a big language barrier. Okay, the English language is getting better, language skills are getting better, but among people employed in manufacturing, food processing sector, still there is a barrier of language skills, and that's if you don't know how to say that you're interested in joining trade unions, if you just can't read the leaflet delivered by the trade union organizer, it's hard to even get to know that what all trade unionism is about.
It's also
so
staggering.
This is also important.
Yes, I agree. But the interesting thing about language barriers is it's a staggering one, because if you think about it, in the 1950s, people had far less money. We were coming out of a war. It was a period of austerity, and yet, and probably in many ways, I would say probably even more harsh than it is with the austerity years that we're currently going through in the UK economy. And the relative deprivation of that time would have been such that it would have been very difficult for Polish manual workers in the 1940s and 50s and 60s to go to school or to learn a language like English. They would just end up just doing labourer work, because that's all they could be allowed to do. And there was a sort of a perception of these people being sort of accepted into the UK, but begrudgingly, if you know what I mean. Whereas now they have a legal right. It is a part of the European Union. It's a very different world we live in. As you say, English is becoming a much more popular language worldwide, and the internet, the language of the internet is English. So there are far more access points to learn a language like English. I mean, your English is very good. Is a good example. So it's ironic then that the people who've been attracted to work in the UK are those within Poland who perhaps don't have that exposure to English.
Yeah, that is very interesting. But on the other hand, what is very significant about this, but maybe about this third wave of the economic migration, we can encounter right now, is that the people are not going to UK not only to earn money, save money, and come to Poland and build a house. More people, they are planning to stay in UK, to pursue their work career, to set up a family, and apply for a British citizenship. So I think that we can maybe what we can point it out is that there is maybe a fourth wave of economic migration, and it's very different from this one that arrived in the UK in 2005. So
I think we're almost suffering a bit of what economists call the marginal utility theory. When there's more of something, eventually you start to want it less. And there's a little bit of that going on here as well. Trade union membership, as one barrier you said, is language. And to a degree, I think you're right. I think that if people don't know how to read and find out about local things, if they have to rely on Polish language booklets to tell them how to join a union, that can be resolved. But of course, I agree, it's so much easier if they actually understand everything in English, because everything will become, everything, once they become a member of the union, they're not going to get suddenly a Polish language booklets from the union. They're going to get the English language material sent to them. There is that issue that people don't want to join because they don't know that it will mean anything to them once they do. Having said that, when English skills improve, when people start to get employed in industries that you've highlighted, which are white-collar work, administrative, legal, trade, whatever it is, they then become less inclined again to join a trade union. So you almost go through a kind of a bell shape where people are joining a union, and then as their overall skills improve, not just their language skills, they suddenly then become less inclined. Would you say that's a real risk?
Yeah, there is a risk, of course, but I think the most important thing is to try to get involved, to see how it works, that there are certainly some benefits deriving from the membership in the union, and I hope that, once Poles will discover what is the spirit of trade unionism, what are the benefits that the trade unions creates, a real community, right? The community of workers. They would like to stay, but it's hard to imagine, because right now the majority of Poles, they are working in this rather low-paid sectors, and so they are mostly employed by the working agencies, and they are more likely also to be employed through gangmasters, and the problems with and in low-paid sectors, as I mentioned. And the problem with these sectors is that you just treat them as a temporary employment for you. You just want to leave it as soon as you can. So, and this is maybe,
so they're not jobs of
a
loyalty.
challenge.
You're right. They're jobs that encourage people to sort of drop and go to the next thing. So there's a constant fluidity there of the workforce, and they're not likely to want to stay around. Therefore, they don't feel they need the union to back them up. Okay, I've got one final question because we've run out of time. Just wanted to ask you very quickly. In your survey, you found, or in your summary report, you mentioned that in 2014, Polish workers in the UK numbered, I think, about 685,000 versus 614,000 in Germany. Now, those are the two countries with by far the largest number of Polish people working in those economies. I can understand why the UK might attract more people again because of the relative better performance of the UK economy versus members of the Eurozone, such as Germany. But we've always believed that there are something in the region of about 2 million Poles living in Germany versus approximately no more than 1 million that came to the UK at the height of the third wave back in 2004 to 2008. What would you say to that? Is there a disparity here? How should we be reading these numbers? Because there seems to be rather a lot of confusion around this still.
Yeah, there are confusions, of course, but as I have mentioned, the current wave of economic migration to UK can be perceived as a not temporary migration, but right now, people want to stay and, set up families and live their lives in the UK. And in case of Germany, of course, there are a lot of people who left a couple of years ago to live in Germany for good. But there are a lot of temporary migration between Poland and Germany because of,
the shared border. It's easy to get across the border. Exactly. Yeah. Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So, okay, so the 600,000s that we're talking about for both the UK and Germany are more likely to be based on, you think, people who are inclined to stay?
Yeah, I think so. This what our research conducted 2 years ago showed, that there is an important shift in the approach of Poles living and working in UK, that they want to stay and set up families and go get a diploma in UK, and this is a completely different approach. So what I'm also trying to say is that they want to integrate within British society.
Yeah. Okay.
They are setting up some organizations. They are getting involved in NGOs who are not typically dedicated to Polish minority group, but they are getting involved in organizations, open for anybody.
Okay.
So these are very, very positive processes we can encounter right now.
Well, fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us, Dominika Potkańska from the Institute of Public Affairs in Warsaw. And we look forward to further insights from your research ongoing.